All right. Ooh, I'm loud. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for taking some time to stop with us and talk about GitHub a little bit. My name is Jason Massey. I'm a solutions engineer with GitHub. In a previous life, I was an application developer building rich web apps and enterprise software. But these days, I spend my time talking with companies large and small about using GitHub to kind of supercharge their development teams, to collaborate better, to bring people closer to the code, and to make developers' lives better. Full disclosure, I am not a Salesforce developer, but I've had the opportunity and the privilege to spend the last few days here talking with people in all sorts of roles across Salesforce development, talking with admins, talking with Salesforce developers, talking with business analysts and team maintainers and team leads. And it's been a really great experience. This is our first year at Dreamforce from GitHub, and thank you all for welcoming us in. Some of the stories that I've heard over the last week are really analogous and really parallel some of the challenges that we talk about at GitHub with customers all the time, general software development principles. And I want to go through a little bit of that today and kind of level set for people what GitHub is, what it does, and how it can help you and your development teams. So first, just a quick show of hands. How many people in the audience are familiar with GitHub? All right, a bunch of you. All right. And how many of you use GitHub for personal development or open source development? Great, great to see. And then how many of you use GitHub at work for Salesforce development? Okay, so just a few. And a little bit of this. So first of all, thank you to everyone who uses GitHub. We're really passionate about our community and building products that help developers. So a huge thank you to everyone who uses GitHub. Feel free to stop by our booth. We're right over there. We have plenty of Octocat stickers to go around. So if your laptop is unadorned, make sure you stop by. So for the people who use Salesforce or who use GitHub every day for Salesforce development or just in general, there might not be anything mind-blowing here for you. I really want to take a step back and make sure that everyone kind of gets a good picture of what GitHub is and what it does. So let's just jump right in. So GitHub.com is the largest online repository of source code that has ever existed. We have 15 million developers worldwide that use GitHub every day to store and collaborate on code. We have over 37 million projects on GitHub, comprised of over 300 different programming languages, from Go to Ruby to Apex, and all over the map. Apex in particular is in the top 20% of most used languages on GitHub, and there's over 11,000 repos on GitHub dedicated to Apex code. Now, people generally think of GitHub as the home of open source, and while there's a huge open source presence on GitHub, enterprises more and more, large and small, are starting to use GitHub to collaborate and to build software. And the last statistic you see up here, close to half of the Fortune 50 uses GitHub Enterprise, which is our on-premise product. It lives behind your firewall and can be deployed, on a private cloud or on your own servers. So I say a lot of these things, and sometimes I see people's eyes glaze over, and they go, but what is it? What is GitHub? So if you want to take a step back, you can think of GitHub as a fully featured collaboration platform built for individuals, teams, and enterprises to build software. And if you want to boil that down even further, I know it's been a long week. My brain's a little done as well, so I'm right there with you if you feel like that. But if you want to boil it down really, really to two essential things, GitHub is version control and collaboration. So GitHub was built in 2008 on top of the complex version control system Git, and it was built to really simplify interactions with Git, right? And to help developers collaborate with each other, to share code, and to have a place to discuss building that code. Again, I had an opportunity to talk with so many people here this week, and the parallels between traditional software development and Salesforce development really stood out to me. So I want to highlight some of those challenges that I spoke with people about this week so that we can get a good basis for how GitHub can help you in your Salesforce development. So in the beginning, we had Singlestream Development. Back 50, 60 years ago in software development, we'd have these monolithic applications, and developers would commit code just right to the application, right? Now, this was a very simple process, and often the simplest process is no process for change management. So this was really easy to understand and really easy to implement. And in fact, some of the architecture of these systems lent itself to this idea of kind of like a single stream of code base, right? The problem with that is that you get into a situation where you have no change sets, you have no statefulness to your code. So when you want to look at a historical perspective of the code, you want to analyze who made changes, what those changes were, and when they happened. It's pretty hard to lock those things and those details down. Now, in addition to just exploring the code, there's a host of other problems. As development moved towards teams of individuals all collaborating on a specific code base, you'd see developers writing similar or related changes, but often they would overlap with something else that someone else was building. And in that single stream of code bases, you'd see that when someone committed something after a team member, they might overwrite something, overwrite an object or a file, and just wipe those changes out. And now this is really hard, thoughtful work to build software. And so the last thing we want to do is lose that work. Is any of this starting to feel familiar? Common themes? So another challenge I heard this week was about, as much as we try to be perfect in our software development, sometimes things do break. We introduce bugs into our code, we break features that already existed, and in this single stream of software development, it's really hard to identify how to roll back those changes to a known good state. If you're lucky, the change that you just put in broke things immediately, but often the case is that the change doesn't break anything for a day, a week, a month. And in those scenarios, how do you go back and tease apart the changes that were good, the changes that were bad, pull out the code that needs to be fixed, and fix it? It becomes really difficult to inspect the code at that level. So in traditional software development, we invented this thing called version control, which I'm sure everyone's heard of. Again, I just want to level set here. Version control was the answer to this idea of exploration of historical software code bases. It allowed you to keep track of changes over time and know the who, what, and when of every code change. So you could roll back when necessary, you could explore the code, spelunk to your heart's content. You could create checkpoints in the code that really reflected the changes that happen at every particular time. And then as version control systems evolved, we came up with this idea of branch-based development to enable parallel development for developers so that a single developer who is working on a code base could make those changes that might overlap with another developer, but when the code gets merged back together, no code is lost, right? Now, on top of the version control system Git that was invented in the mid-2000s by the inventor of the Linux kernel, we built GitHub. So GitHub is a place to collaborate and develop better together. We've built a lot of collaboration features on top of just the basic version control system that Git is to allow people to have things like lightweight issue tracking, at mentions where you can bring people into the conversation about your code, because often we see that the why of what you're developing is just as important as the what. Understanding the reasons behind the development are super important to capture. We invented the idea of pull requests, where you make code changes and then you submit those and say, hey, Can we merge this back into the main line? And then a discussion about that code ensues. And we recently released projects, which is just a lightweight project management feature. It's like a Kanban-style board where you can put things in backlog, see what's in progress, get a good snapshot of your project right next to the code. So again, all of these things live right where the code is. So with GitHub, we have the ability to inspect things at a high level, really drill into the code and the line level features and changes, and all of the collaboration is just bundled up into one tool. So I want to take a step into GitHub and kind of show you what it looks like, show you what collaboration looks like for a development team on GitHub. So at GitHub, we're huge proponents of open source, of course, and we have a few open source projects that I'll mention here. The first one is called Atom. You might have seen it in the developer keynote yesterday. It's a hackable text editor. It's got a great plugin of ecosystem of plugins and additions that you can customize it in a bunch of different ways. But at GitHub, we use GitHub to build software. So the Atom team at GitHub uses GitHub to manage their projects, to write and develop code, and to collaborate on that code. So let's walk through this a little bit. As long as I can find my mouse, then we'll be all fine. There we go. So this is GitHub. This is the Atom repository on GitHub. You can see immediately that you have a file-level view of all of the things that are contained in the repository with some metadata attached saying, how recently this was changed. Another thing we do in GitHub is render certain file types so that they're easy to display right in the interface. This README, which we encourage every project to have a README, so you have a quick snapshot of what the project does, is actually written in a language called Markdown. It's a rich text language, and essentially we just render that right into the interface. So you can look through GitHub, and there's lots of high points right here. This project is under the MIT license, and we have 30,000 commits plus since the start of this project. Talking about that who, what, and when of the code, you can really dig into the commits, every single change that's happened to this code base over the lifetime of the project. And you can scroll down very easily. Even as recently as, let's say, 2 hours ago, people have been committing changes to this project. And you can see, you can drill down even further into those packages of commits to see the files that changed. Here we have 2 files with a number of additions here. At the line level, you can see right in the interface in a nice, easy-to-read display. So if we go back and take a look at maybe just one specific file and see how it's changed over time, we can look at that README file, and I'll pull it up. Obviously, it renders into the browser just like this. We have images and things like that building in. We can also take a look at the raw version of the file. This is what the Markdown actually looks like under the hood before we clean it up and make it look pretty. And you can see the history of the file and every change that has touched that file since the invention of the code base, right? So this is how this file has progressed just from a single file view. You see every commit. You see some messages about why that commit was made. And something I love to look at is blame. A little fun thing that Git does, where you can literally drill into the line levels of the file and see the commits that were associated with each particular change to a file. Now, again, this is for our Atom text editor, but this is any code base. Any code base version by Git can be inspected in this way. So that's diffs and blame. All of that is native to the application. It's built right in. What I want to talk about now is a couple of the collaborative features. Issue tracking is a big one. It's probably a concept most of you are familiar with, but you can log feature requests and bugs and issues against a code base, enhancements, things like that. Give a quick description and really drill into what you want that to look like, right? We have a nice labeling system in GitHub For this open source project, something that's nice is we have a label called beginner. So the people who maybe are just starting out in development can look for something like this as a feature that they can tackle on their own and build their own knowledge. Now, GitHub and Salesforce really have an alignment here. At GitHub, we like to talk about the new developer. Right? We talk about people coming out of coding boot camps, the person who just picked up a JavaScript book and wanted to start building something. We talk about kids who are learning how to code under the age of 10. I had the opportunity to sit and watch some of the kids who came over here to the coding area over here, and it was just incredible to watch. Right? This type of interaction and this type of idea of building skills of people is something that we endorse heavily at GitHub. And I know that Salesforce really has that idea as well, the Trailhead initiative. The people I talked to this week, whether they were business analysts or developers writing Apex triggers, at some level, if you're changing an application, you are a developer. So you should be using development practices. These are standard things that we use to help us move our applications along and continue that business continuity. So the last thing I want to show here in the interface is pull requests. So the idea of starting a conversation around code and then continuing that conversation, capturing the conversation in a place that's historical that you can go back and reference. Let's take a look at one of the pull requests with the most comments, because they're just fun to look at. You can see, again, there's all sorts of metadata in the UI that tells you all about these pull requests. Let's take a look at this one, upgrading Electron. So Electron is another open source project that we have for writing cross-platform desktop applications. And we built Atom on top of Electron. So this particular pull request is a team of developers saying, hey, we need to upgrade the version of Electron. We're seeing some problems. You see someone starts the initial work. There are some commits that take place, a couple of comments, and then a conversation ensues, right? Where usually this conversation might take place in a stop and chat or in an email thread. Here it lives right next to the code, so that when you're looking at this a year from now and thinking, why didn't we upgrade Electron, or why did we upgrade Electron underneath Atom? You can go back and look at the full discussion. So we see comments like, hey, nothing's blurry anymore because we upgraded. And then there's some comments around subpixel anti-aliasing. Scroll bars seem to disappear randomly. And as we go on and the conversation continues, you'll see that in the browser, right in the pull request, we can embed things like images, like GIFs. I say GIFs. Sorry if anyone says GIFs. And all of that is right there, stays with the code conversation, and it makes it really easy to understand what's going on. Some of the collaborative features that we've built in make it so that even if you're not a developer, even if you're not hacking code every day, it's useful to see these conversations at a project management level to understand where things are going. It really closes that feedback loop, so you're not spending 2 weeks in a sprint and then throwing something over the wall, and then someone says, hey, that's not what I asked for. You can have this conversation. It's all captured within the pull request, and at the end of the day, code gets merged back into that main production branch. So just for searchability, I want to show you that you can also see from a historical perspective and from a searchability perspective, everywhere that Electron is mentioned in the code base, and then every issue or pull request where Electron is mentioned. And here's the one we were just looking at. So again, if you are looking at this a year later, and you're trying to understand something, why a feature got built or didn't get built, why it got built in a certain way, all of that is there at your fingertips. One last thing I want to show you from the GitHub UI is a feature we just released a couple weeks ago called Projects. Again, it's that Kanban-style board with just links to issues, links to pull requests. Everything lives close to the code, so it's easy to access. So that's what GitHub looks like. Hopefully, this helps flesh out for any of you who are unfamiliar what GitHub is, what it does. So At GitHub, we advocate a workflow called the GitHub Flow. So it's a branch-based development model. You make a branch if you want to make a feature or an enhancement or fix something or add something. Make your own branch. It's your own personal space to work and develop. You build some commits on top of that, start building your feature, and then you open up a pull request. So you can get that conversation going. Many times in development, you're building kind of in a cave, right? GitHub allows you to break down those silos and bring the conversation about code more transparency. So the pull request happens, there's discussion around the pull request, around the changes, and then eventually you merge that code back in. So with GitHub, you really have clarity in your history, right? You can inspect the code at a deep level. You can bring people into the conversation. You can enable parallel development where people are working on different pieces of the code base and don't clobber each other when it's time to merge those pieces of code back together. You can roll back with confidence. So when you hit a bug, when you need to move back to a previous version or tease apart some breaking changes that were put into your application, all of that is inspectable. It's right there, right for you to look at. One of the biggest parts of collaboration is discovering the why, understanding, like I've said, the context and the conversation around building code, and why it's important to bring in team members and have people have transparency across your development organization into what's being built. And then, of course, to manage the evolution of your product, not strictly from a granular, this file changed, this particular line changed, but also from a high level, what features are being worked on, what releases are scheduled. All of that's built into the GitHub UI, and it's a great place to collaborate. It's where modern software development is taking place. So I'd encourage you, if you have any questions, if you want to follow up, we're over at the GitHub booth. We'd be happy to talk to you about any struggles you're having, any pain points around software development, and feel free to pick up a sticker while you're over there. Thanks so much.